In my work with teens and young adults, especially those with ADHD, I see this pattern pop up time and time again to where when feedback is given, even if it's gentle, even if it's neutral, it's taken as rejection. And even when no one intended harm, the emotional pain can be immediate and intense. If this is you or your child, by the end of this video, you're going to understand why these feelings are so overwhelming, why it's often accompanied by anger, and why this isn't about being too sensitive or dramatic. We're going to talk about what rejection sensitive dysphoria actually looks like, what's happening underneath that anger, and most importantly, we're going to talk about what helps for the person experiencing it and for the folks who are supporting them. So let's first talk about what rejection sensitive dysphoria is and what it's not. You're not going to find rejection sensitive dysphoria as a diagnosis in the DSM. You're not going to find it in this puppy right here. Rather, it's a term widely used, especially in ADHD communities. And it's used to describe a pattern of reacting to perceived criticism or rejection. And that word is key, perceived. And in most of the cases that I've seen, the rejection isn't even there. Rather, it's an issue of miscommunication or neutral feedback or even supportive feedback. But the nervous system doesn't perceive it that way. If you're a parent watching this is important to remember, because when the reaction seems inappropriate or disproportionate, it's not because they have an attitude problem or they're being purposefully defiant. And if you're an adult hearing this is also important to remember, because what this means is that it's not that something is wrong with you. It's not that something in you is broken. Rather, this is pain. Real pain. Here, let me give you an example. To where I worked with a young woman one time, and she wanted to take on more responsibility at work. She wanted to work more hours. But the thing is that she had an issue with time management, turning in things late, sometimes being late. And as you can imagine, with someone with ADHD, this isn't necessarily uncommon, right? So when she went to her boss and wanted to take on more responsibility, his feedback was something along the lines of this, is to where like, I love it that you want to take on more responsibility. At this point in time, I can't do that. However, if you can be consistent in your work for the next couple of months, we can revisit this and you can take on more responsibility. That was reasonable feedback, even supportive, right? He was able to come up with a plan, but how that was perceived, how that was taken in was criticism. And what happened next in this situation wasn't a big confrontation. It wasn't a big blow up. It was a grudge. She started talking badly about the boss with her friends, with other people at that work. And this led to a cycle of her being less motivated. Eventually, she wasn't showing up for her work. She was missing days and appointments. And she just felt more and more overwhelmed and overloaded. So eventually she just avoided work altogether. And you can imagine what that led to, right? She had to be let go. And so here's my point, is that rejection sensitive dysphoria doesn't just affect relationships between folks, but it quietly erodes functioning. So what's going on internally in times like this? I often see a cognitive distortion known as mind reading that pops up, to where it's not necessarily they're against me or I'm going to lose everything. That's a different cognitive distortion called catastrophizing. Rather, the biggest one that I see is mind reading, to where they're disappointed in me. They don't like me anymore. They don't think that I'm good at my job. And yeah, this can trace all the way back to earlier relationships, being ignored, mistreated, dismissed, minimized, told that you were too much because of your ADHD symptoms. And over time, when this keeps happening time and time again, your nervous system learns something. It learns that criticism equals danger. Now, here's the really important part, because what happens next is usually anger comes up. But I want you to keep in mind, anger is not the core emotion with this. Anger always covers something up. Anger is a secondary emotion. So what could this anger be covering up, right? It could be covering up sadness, guilt, shame, hurt, or even anger is a defensive emotion, right? People can use it to reassert control over a situation where they feel they have little to no control over. So there's a reason that people become angry. And if all you see is the anger, you're going to miss the pain that's happening underneath. So now let's talk about a particular problem that often happens, or that I've seen often happen in rejection sensitive dysphoria, called the echo chamber problem. And this kind of adds another layer to things. So let me give you an example. Let's go back to that prior one, to where that young woman was having some difficulty with her boss. She didn't go and confront her boss. She didn't have a conversation, a direct conversation about it. Rather, she went to her friends. And her friends, being good friends, would validate her. And that's beautiful and that's wonderful. And people do need validation. But when that's all you're hearing, and when that's the only thing that's being reflected back to you, sometimes it can create an echo chamber. And when you do that, and when you do it enough, it starts to alter the narrative. It starts to alter the story from something of, hey, maybe we can talk about this. Maybe they didn't mean that message. Maybe there's some sort of miscommunication going on here. And it can slowly meld into something on like, they don't know what they're talking about, or they don't know how to do their job, or even, they're unfair, or they're against me. And what gets mirrored back is certainty, not curiosity. And then the pain that's underneath never gets addressed, and the narrative hardens. And just a little quick aside to the echo chamber problem, this can pop up in other areas of our life as well, especially if you're using generative AI like ChatGPT or Claude, to where a lot of people are using these large language models, LLMs, to talk about their problems, right? So using it as a therapist, and even though it can be backed up by research, these LLMs have access to the entire internet. But what they're designed to do is to echo back your best traits. And hey, sometimes that's okay. But in order to get real progress, in order for any really good work to happen, you don't want an echo chamber. You want someone who can gently confront you. You need someone who can push back a little bit and have you examine yourself. And that's what a human therapist can do. A good human therapist will be able to do that with you. So that's my quick plug for seeing a human therapist instead of using ChatGPT. So let's get back to the video. So now I want to share another example with you on how someone with rejection sensitive dysphoria, how the relationship can still be repaired, because it doesn't always have to end badly. So I worked with another young woman who was struggling to get things done at work. She was overpromising and under-delivering, right? I'll get it done by this time. And then when that time came around, it just wasn't delivered. So she was struggling with the follow through. She was also struggling with time management. And here's some important context to where she was struggling with a lot of other issues, not just time management at that point in time. Family conflict, medical issues that was going on with her. Lots of different things were happening. And her boss, who's very straightforward, very blunt, said to her, "I'm getting concerned about your performance." And that scared her. And once that fear set in, once that idea of they're criticizing me set in, everything else got interpreted through that negative lens. Oh, he said that thing kind of weird. Did he mean that this way? Why doesn't he see how hard I'm trying? He phrased that weird. He must be mad at me. And over time, that turns to anger. But this time, unlike that first story that I shared, something different happened. There was communication. They talked about it. They worked it out. And it wasn't just her reaction to things. The boss in this example did some different things too. He softened his tone. He got curious. He phrased things and like, I know that you're going through a lot right now. You were able to talk about what expectations are and clarify things together. Here's the other thing. Once the pressure came down, insight became possible for her. And this is very important. Insight does not happen when the other person feels threatened. When you're threatened, you're in survival mode, right? You're in fight or flight. But once that threat level goes down, once that anxiety goes down, then the person is able to examine their role in things. And that insight happened for her to where she was able to say to herself, when I'm in pain, I interpret things negatively. And then her and her boss were able to work out a plan that actually stuck. So now I want to talk about the mirror moment. This is a moment that always makes me think about that movie Never Ending Story. To where if you've seen that movie before, near the end of Atreyu's tasks, there's one last task that he's got to do before he can go and fight the nothing. And this is a task that one of the characters says makes most warriors run away screaming. And that's to look at yourself in the mirror. And that's the scariest thing anybody can do. It's much easier to say, all of this is your fault. I didn't have anything to do with it. It's all you. But when you do that, you give that other person all of the power and you take it away from yourself. What takes real strength is to be able to ask yourself and act upon the answers of what's my role in this? What are my triggers? And most importantly, what can I change? What do I have the power to change? And that isn't about blame. That's about self-understanding and agency. That's real power. So if what I've described in this video is you or your child, I want you to know something. This reaction that you're having makes sense. It has a history. It doesn't mean that you're weak or broken or dramatic. When criticism hits these old wounds, it hurts. And at the same time, understanding this pattern, it gives you options. Awareness creates choices. Curiosity can interrupt the spiral. And communication can bring the pressure down. So whether you're a parent or if you're living with this yourself, the goal isn't to get rid of this feeling. It's to understand that pattern so it doesn't end up running your life. And that's something that you do have power over.